Good evening, and welcome to the virtual Alumni Town Hall with Rice President David W. Leebron. My name is Kathy Dantley Warren, the Vice President for Development and Alumni Relations, and I'm pleased to welcome alumni, parents, and friends from all over the world to this virtual event tonight. It has been an unprecedented and unsettling few months for all of us. I know there are many demands on your attention, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your evening and for your ongoing interest in Rice's future. In my role, I have the privilege of witnessing so many of you go out of your way to build up and support the Rice community. Many of you provide career advice to students and young alumni, understanding the challenges they now face. I've seen parents create a sense of campus at home for their students. I've seen the generosity of the Rice community help ensure that all students can learn remotely, especially those with less means. And I see the constant encouragement of our students to press on and utilize their knowledge to make a difference. I want to thank our dedicated volunteers, certainly the Rice Board of Trustees and the Association of Rice Alumni Board, as well as the numerous others who dedicate their valuable time to move our community forward. During tonight's town hall, President Leebron will discuss how Rice is maintaining its leadership in education while preparing for the fall 2020 semester and laying the groundwork for a better future. After his remarks, he will be joined by Reggie DeRoche, former Dean of the School of Engineering and newly appointed Provost, for a question and answer session. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation. Please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to submit your question. President Leebron and Provost DeRoche will answer questions at the conclusion of the President's remarks. Please note that we are recording this discussion and will make the video available after this event. And now I'd like to introduce the 7th President of Rice University, David W. Leebron. The floor is yours, President Leebron.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank all of you for joining us tonight. We so appreciate your engagement, and as Kathy said, taking the time to be with us, taking an interest in our university. We meet, of course, at an extraordinarily difficult time for our world and most particularly our country. We're really in the midst of 3 crises that have come together. A health crisis in the form of a global pandemic that has swept across the United States, but not the same in all communities. Many of us have not really been out and about in some time. And of course, that's resulted in an economic catastrophe with 40 million people out of work and the unemployment rate now above 15%. And among the least well-paid, that unemployment rate is reported to be about 40%. And so that's an extraordinary hardship. And in the last week or so, our national fabric has been rent by a horrible killing in Minneapolis that has really exposed the fundamental inequities and inequalities that it is our responsibility to acknowledge and to deal with. And so I want to thank you all for taking this time at this difficult time and taking an interest in your university. This evening, what I would like to do is first give a brief report on the university of the kind of information that I've presented in the past and go through that relatively quickly. Second, talk a little bit about how we have responded to the pandemic of COVID-19. Third, talk a little bit about the financial implications of the financial fallout from COVID-19. And then finally, talk briefly about how we are thinking about this most recent crisis in America over the issue of racial relations and equity. So I'll begin, as I said, with a general report, but I want to begin with the statement of our mission, particularly at a time of crisis when we face change and need to adapt to rapidly evolving circumstances. It's incredibly important for us to have a clear vision of what we are about, of our distinctive commitment to undergraduate education, a commitment to path-breaking research, unsurpassed teaching, and particularly important to contributions to the betterment of our world. And we do this by building a diverse community of learning and discovery that produces leaders across the full spectrum of human endeavor. And everything we do needs to be guided by our values of responsibility, integrity, community, and excellence. It is those values, in my view, that are more important than ever as we deal with these three crises. We talked before about the vision for the second century, which is our strategic plan, a 7-point strategic plan to comprehensively build up our university and continue progress. I won't be tonight touching on each of those, but they continue to guide us, while at the same time we ask the question in what ways it needs to be changed or modified or enlarged in recognition of the extraordinary times that we are in. I want to start also by welcoming both our new provosts, as you have heard, Reggie DeRoche, who we'll hear from later, and Kathy Dantley-Warren, who you have also heard from, our new Vice President for Development and Alumni Relationships. Leadership is an incredibly important part of our ability to deal with these crises, and I could not be more appreciative than to have Reggie and Kathy as part of our team. So, looking at some of the news for the year, our university has grown substantially over the past 15 years. When I arrived, a little under 5,000, now a little over 7,000. Some change in composition, more graduate students than we used to have. We're now a fairly balanced university between undergraduates and graduate students. And some parts have grown very substantially, and particularly our professional master's programs are now a very important component of the university. Going to undergraduate enrollment, this tracks the growth of our applicants. And what you certainly can see from here is the rapid growth of our applicants from outside Texas, both domestic and international. Last year was a high year for us, in part because of the announcement of the Rice investment, which I'll come back to. This year, we're actually, even though there's been a downturn, relatively pleased with the level of applicants. That we didn't have a big announcement like the Rice investment this year, but still our applications are up substantially from 2 years ago. And things look good for the fall in terms of enrollments. This is a statement of our deposits, 1,058 undergraduate deposits for a class of, we hope, about 950 or 60 students, and 34 so far transfers. Actually, I think we're now up really more to about 50 transfer students. And of course, graduate students, slightly more entering graduate students than undergraduates in our MBA, master's, and doctoral programs. In terms of diversity, our undergraduate student body has become much more diverse over the last 15 years. You'll see now roughly split between white Americans, Asian Americans, and underrepresented minorities in the class. To give you a comparative idea, on the left here of the slide is the percent of underrepresented minorities. That's measured as a percent of our domestic students. And as you'll see, Rice is among the most diverse. In graduate students at universities, we're closer to the middle, and we all have a great deal of work in building up the diverse representation in our graduate student bodies. We're also an extremely international community at Rice. 15 years ago, when I arrived at Rice, the percentage of undergraduates was slightly under 3% of the student body. It's now about 12% of our student body. We were among the lowest 15 years ago, and we're sort of in the high middle now today. And among graduate students, of course, a very strong international component in our graduate student body. And that both of these are sources of concern as our international students face potentially greater barriers to travel in coming to Rice. But we're also a very international community among our faculty. Here you can see that about 36% of our full-time tenure and tenure-track faculty are really academic immigrants. They got their first degree outside the United States. Some of them are now American citizens, some permanent residents. But it gives you an indication, not just in our student body, but building the most talented community of teachers and researchers that we can, our ability to recruit from all over the world is really vital. This gives you a snapshot of the most recent hiring by our faculty. And you can see from the left, not quite a balance on gender, but making progress. And on the right, you can see that the majority of our faculty recruited this year is faculty of color. It also shows you the challenge of diversifying our faculty, as a small number of people relative to the entire faculty of 600 or so are hired each year, compared, for example, to the undergraduate student body, which turns over completely every 4 years. And the faculty, of course, teach, but they also do research. That research is really vital to the reputation of the university. And here you can see we've had an approximate doubling of our research funding over the last 15 years, and a change in the sources, much more, for example, from foundations, significantly more from state, local, and others, particularly in Texas, where we benefited from some innovative research programs that support universities and other institutions. Of course, our faculty have achieved a lot of recognition across the entire spectrum of the university. Lacey Johnson in English with the Guggenheim Fellowship, Lydia Kavraki, recognized for outstanding work in computer science. And Caleb McDaniel, of course, recently won the Pulitzer Prize for his book, The Sweet Taste of Liberty, an extraordinary story of an escaped slave who sued her former master for damages after the Civil War. That book has, of course, gotten international attention. And in addition, we had 2 new members of the National Academies, one who you've already met, Reggie DeRoche, and then also Jean France in the National Academy of Engineering as well. And we're launching new programs in neuroengineering, the Carbon Hub, which is an effort to use hydrocarbons in a way that won't damage the environment by producing graphene and hydrogen. A new program in African American Studies, which is both a center and a new minor for our students, and new professional master's degrees across the university, including, as I'll mention later, our online master's degree in computer science. And then a new program, Building Research on Inequality and Diversity to Grow Equity, which I'll come back to toward the end. We think sometimes of Rice as a comparatively small university, and in many ways we are, with 7,000 more or less full-time students on our campus. But we've become a much larger university by using the capability that we have online. And indeed, it was the fact that we had already made those investments that enabled us to move with such success and move our courses online. Millions of enrollments to date, the 1.6 million in more than one course. Total enrollments just in 2019, almost 300,000, 190,000 of those international. As I mentioned, we launched our MBA online in July 2018, our Master of Computer Science this past year, and both of those are off to very successful starts, really expanding the footprint and reach of Rice University on a scale that we haven't known before, but not changing the on-campus experience for our students here in Houston. Of course, we're reaching to establish global connections, most recently one with IIT Kanpur in India around material science. This was a photo taken from the celebration of that event in January. And of course, to support that work, there's a lot of building on campus. You'll see here a list of all the projects, those in reddish color or are research-oriented projects by and large. Those in the green color are student-oriented projects, although the research projects obviously serve the students very well, and the others are infrastructure investments that we've made at the university. 2 very important projects I want to mention. One is Craft Hall for Social Sciences, the first building at Rice completely dedicated to the social sciences. Spectacular building across the road from the Baker Institute. I think as we think about the future, and particularly the contribution that Rice is going to make in addressing some of the problems we face as a nation, in inequality, for example, the Craft Hall for Social Sciences is going to be very important. It's the home for the Kinder Institute for Urban Research, and it's the home for HERC, the Houston Education Research Consortium, 2 efforts that are undoubtedly going to be very important in that endeavor. And this is new Bronfman Music and Performing Arts Center, a magnificent building importantly for our School of Music and its first-ranked opera program, but it's also going to be a fabulous venue for bringing speakers to campus and for student performances in theater, for example. And so as we work to really bring the outside world to Rice, this facility is going to be vitally important to make sure we have a great place for those events. Most recently, we named the Grove in the central quad of the campus for Reverend William Lawson. Those of you in Houston will certainly recognize the name. This is one of the leading civil rights people in Houston, play a critical role really in integrating the city and bringing civil rights. This was named several weeks ago. And of course, the various rankings around the world, some are more reliable than others, as I like to say. You can tell the higher the ranking, the more reliable the ranking service is, but really across a wide range of things that we might look at in judging our university, the quality of the education, the quality and diversity of our student body, the research achievements of the university. Rice is doing well across the board. And just a word this year from the Rice investment. This class is really a spectacular class under the Rice investment. And if you look at it, about 63%, almost 2/3 of our US students receive financial aid this year. What we adopted a couple of years ago is really among the most generous programs in higher education. You can see on the left the basic outline of the program and see that really for students from families under $130,000, they won't really have to pay for tuition at all. I want to just take a moment to acknowledge our extraordinary students. This year I've had more of an opportunity than usual to get to know a lot of students individually. In fact, Savannah Kofer, who received the very prestigious Knight Hennessy Scholar, I sat in on her class on digital origami, I think was the class. I didn't understand exactly what that was, but she was a very effective teacher. This is one of the classes organized in the college. And Courtney McJunkins, who I've gotten to know fairly well, recently received the Truman Scholar. And of course, our student athletes are also truly extraordinary. Erica Agumike, who actually was an intern in my office this year, received the Joyce Pounds Hardy Award for the Outstanding Female Athlete, a star in our highly successful basketball team, and also recently won an NCAA postgraduate fellowship and plans to head to med school. And Adolfo Carvalho of the men's track and field won the Bob Quinn Award for the Outstanding Male Athlete. And then we had really outstanding teams, particularly in our women's sports, last year in tennis, in basketball, in volleyball, on the track team, and building success in our other sports and our men's sports as well. Now I'm going to move on to the university's response to COVID-19. We're in a rapidly evolving and changing situation, and one of the most important things in a situation like that is to make sure that we're guided by a consistent set of principles, because the facts might change, but hopefully the principles won't. First and most important is to protect the health and well-being of every member of our community, and at the same time contribute to the national and local efforts to reduce the spread of the virus, and to base our decisions on health guidance from an authoritative scientific source, namely the CDC, and to the extent possible, carry out our academic missions in the best way possible and take actions that are consistent with our values. We moved over 1,900 courses online in a week. We continued to provide housing. We gave our students, unlike some other universities, we gave them pretty substantial notice, in part as a result of our decision to cancel the week of classes before spring break, and then we gave them a significant amount of time to move out. But we also recognized that not all of our students could leave campus, international students and others for whom their home environment would not be the best environment to continue their education online. We provided support to students and faculty who needed that support. We had a fund if they needed additional technology in order to engage in the online learning. We adopted very flexible approaches to grading and course withdrawal, recognizing the stress that our students were under. And the result was the successful completion of the semester by almost all of the students who were engaged in the online learning. And then we adopted a research program. Rice pledged $500,000, which we have been seeking to match. We've awarded 18 grants to Rice researchers to conduct COVID-19 research. And that's all across the campus. That's of course in science and engineering, but it's also in the humanities, social sciences, and even music. The one effort that got really international publicity was the designs for a very inexpensive ventilator at a time when folks were really deeply concerned that the shortage of ventilators was going to be one of the leading causes contributing to death. The Rice folks got into action at Rice 360 and quickly designed and made freely available the designs for a ventilator that would cost less than $300 compared to the thousands of dollars the ventilator ordinary costs. And we welcomed members of the Texas Medical Center, the workers of the Texas Medical Center to our campus. We vacated 2 of the colleges and invited them, those who didn't want to go home either because they were so exhausted or didn't want to take the risk of infecting their family. We welcomed them to our campus. I was really heartened by the universal support that we received for this move. And we had a virtual commencement. You'll have to see Gabrielle Falcon, one of our extraordinary students who was quoted in the newspaper about her experience. I recently went through this experience with my own son who graduated virtually. The students were sad not to be on campus, but they were, I think, pleased to have an opportunity. And we look forward, we hope, to welcoming them back to the campus for a special ceremony for the class of 2020. So I want to talk a little bit more broadly about the implications of the COVID-19. I gave a talk the other day on crises, and so I've been thinking sort of generally about crises and all the different kinds of impact that a crisis can have. Financial, health and safety, conditions of our physical assets and whether you can use them, reputational, political, operational, can you really still run the facility, and what's the impact on your campus or university culture and your community. And of course, this crisis has had an effect on most of those. So here's a brief list of the things that are a little bit different as we face COVID-19 and its fallout. The sort of very slow beginning, which I think unfortunately our nation did not take sufficient advantage of the warning. At Rice, we acted very quickly, in part because one of our employees was one of the early folks in the United States to develop a case of COVID-19. But as this accelerates, you need to make very quick decisions. You need new capabilities. We had online capabilities, but not the kind of online capabilities we needed. We had people who thought they could never teach a class online, suddenly learn how they could teach a class online, and many of them did so in the end with a lot of enthusiasm. Really the intense local aspects, and of course that's very true financially with the effects of the drop in energy prices, and the global aspects as well with its distinctive impact on our international students. Multiple aspects of simultaneous crises of health, financial, operational, the long duration of a crisis. Many crises are very intense. This is intense and long. And the uncertainty and lack of predictability, the constantly changing facts. I follow about 15 websites just to get a sense of what this looks like every day. And widespread impact across higher ed, but not affecting every institution equally. And that really raises a really question about the transformation of the sector. Here's a brief list of some of the key events. It was really way back in January, we had our first communication on COVID. February, a month later, learned that a member of the Rice community had returned from travel, not to a high-risk region with symptoms. And then we began to make our decisions about canceling classes, winding down researches, canceling in-person summer events, and now then beginning to make decisions about returning. But it is a transformational crisis in terms of the new capabilities we needed and massive online education, for example, and not just for classes, but also delivering services online, mental health services. The change in our financial model is each of our revenues focuses some risks, competitive relationships that may be transformed. Really, as a result of the crisis, the future has arrived a little more quickly at our door. And that requires, as we undergo these transformations, to really ask, What are the things that are most important to us as an institution, as a community? What is central to us? So we've started planning for the fall, in person, 3-phase ramp up beginning in June, which of course we're in now. Adoption of the dual delivery, asking every class where it's capable. It's not capable in every single class to be delivering that class simultaneously, both in person and online. A shortening of the semester to end the semester before Thanksgiving, taking into account the possibility of resurgence, a second phase of the virus, adopting safety and physical distancing measures, the testing, tracing, and perhaps quarantining of our population, the physical distancing, and then some flexibility for international students, recognizing that they may have to delay their start to the fall. This was from the message that actually I conveyed at our town hall on May 22nd, where we began to talk more, not just about the health effects and how we would continue to operate, but what the longer consequences of this might be for our community, given the financial aspects. And we had told folks that we would preserve their jobs through the semester. Really, this is a lot of institutions, of course, have let go of their personnel. We have not at this point in time, but we're going to have to deal with, one way or another, the challenges we face. There are difficult challenges ahead, but as I remember, I'm sorry, we are owls. We soar when the skies are darkest. And that's the graphic I use to illustrate that. So moving on to the current state, here's where we are. And it's important to keep in mind the university never shut. We weren't closed. We were reduced to about 10% of our population on campus, about 250 students coming on campus. And that meant maybe around 300 staff coming on campus, maintaining communication. We moved summer school entirely online and decided to reduce the fees very substantially, recognizing that many folks had lost their employment or were stuck in their homes, concerned about our own students, but also folks across Houston. The result of that was very high enrollment this summer, very substantially higher enrollment. And we're planning, of course, as I said, to return to the campus in the fall if the conditions permit, recognizing that we face an evolving and uncertain environment. There was one day in March where we made an announcement about our plans on a Wednesday, and 24 hours later I had to reverse that announcement given the change in the circumstances. Here are just some of the issues that we're looking at, or the Academic Restart Committee, or ARC, is looking at as we look to begin. It's not just moving classes online, giving folks more training not just in the online delivery so we can do it even better, but also the dual delivery in locations, how we're going to approach physical distancing, changes in how we're going to have to schedule the classes, seating in the classes, an entire range of issues that we need to look at. And then I mentioned the financial impact. Of course, it has affected the entire economy, direct costs to the university, about $10 million so far in expenses and lost revenue, volatility of the financial markets, impacts on the endowment and philanthropy, the high unemployment, which is certainly going to impact student financial aid, and the uncertainty in travel restrictions, which, as I mentioned, are going to affect our international students. We are in some ways in a stronger position than many of our peers. Our comparatively large endowment, although it's not a rainy day fund or piggy bank and can't be used, it does enable us to smooth transitions rather than take the cuts, for example, all at once. We have the resources to pay our bills. We're overall strong financially. Our tuition is already lower than our peers, making us already more affordable given the change in circumstances. And we already have the right investment in place. And so many of our students are already supported in a very strong way. And because of new construction on the campus, if we think it's desirable, we could increase enrollment at this time. We don't own a hospital, which has turned out to be drains on campuses. Although we are very proud of our successful athletics programs, unlike the big five conferences, they don't generate a lot of revenues that are at risk and so on. So we have plans underway to take advantage of our situation. I do want to thank the managers of the Rice Management Company, which have really done a terrific job in managing the endowment to provide the resources we need, but also in managing it in a way so our losses aren't severe. We anticipate a gap or so of $60 million, which we'll have to close really over the next several years. That's going to depend, of course, on endowment returns, net tuition revenue, which I mentioned. That will depend, whether we're actually operating on campus or not, and students decide to defer philanthropy and athletics and other event revenues. And so we'll be working over the summer to figure out what that actually entails. So now I want to move, as I reach sort of the conclusion of this, to these the current circumstances that we face. And this is really echoed across our nation, and we've really seen the pain, and not just the pain from the horrible killing of George Floyd, but really a revealing of the divide in this nation and the inequality and equity that is crying out to be addressed. As a university, we need to take responsibility for that. We need to take responsibility by creating opportunity and by learning about inequality and inequity and making sure that we welcome, as a university, as best we can, all members of our diverse community. This is a kind of third crisis, as I referred to before, the killing of George Floyd and its aftermath. Why is that? First, because we are increasingly diverse communities, saw before, with some of our own problems and our own histories, which I'll come back to. We must value each and every part of our community and really seek to understand their perspective and the challenges that they face. Our mission as a university is to investigate problems of all kinds, whether in science or social science and humanities, and drive understanding and change, and to be an engine of opportunity. That is really our fundamental mission. Our students now and others are choosing to be agents of change. This generation, I think, more than many that we have seen over the last decades. And then a part of this is our obligation to our home community of Houston. We need to be a positive force for change in our city. There are efforts underway at Rice helping address these issues. We announced, I think it was about a year ago, the Task Force on Slavery, Segregation, and Racial Injustice, co-chaired by Caleb McDaniel, who wrote the book I referred to before, and Alex Bird, himself a Rice graduate. The new African and African American Studies Center, led by Tony Pinn, the Bridge effort, looking into inequality, diversity, and equity, led by Jennifer Bratter of the Sociology Department, the Houston Education Research Consortium, which brings together really all the school districts around Houston and uses their data to find out what's really effective at creating effective education and opportunity. The Black Male Leadership Initiative on campus, the Aruba Legacy Fund. We're so grateful to Aruba to promote diversity initiatives and really impact the Black community at Rice, and a range of other multicultural initiatives. Looking at the current environment, and particularly these most recent events, we decided that we needed to postpone the 24-hour giving challenge that was scheduled, actually I think for tomorrow. That will be rescheduled tentatively for June 25th. We'll sort of evaluate that as well. We need to know, we understand now we need to focus on the immediate issues before us. And so with that, again, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I look forward to your questions. Thank you again for your engagement, and let's go to the questions.
Thank you very much, President Leebron. And now at this time, we're pleased to welcome Provost Reggie DeRoche for the Q&A portion of the town hall. And thank you, Provost DeRoche, for joining us and lending your expertise and wisdom to this conversation. So let me just jump right into the questions now. President Leebron, you shared some of the efforts that are underway at Rice in your last few slides related to promoting diversity and equity and inclusion. Can you talk about other efforts that are underway to address these issues at Rice and beyond?
So I'll mention three. There are a lot of them. The first I'm going to actually turn over to our provost, which is, really we need to continue building a diverse community. That requires a lot of focus on the faculty. That's one of the most important things that we need to do. We've had a lot of success in the past few years, but we need to do more. And I'll turn that over to Reggie to answer in a second. I do think we need to look at the proper education and training, diversity training for our students, for our faculty, and make sure that that serves our community as well as possible, so we all understand the perspectives of others and can really make sure that we are as welcoming as possible. And the third, I would say, is this engagement in Houston and contributing to the diverse communities of Houston. Houston is, by some measure, the most diverse city in the United States. We're proud to be a part of that, and we need to make a contribution to the success of the diverse communities in Houston. But I'll now turn it over to Reggie to talk a little bit about the faculty recruitment aspect of it.
Sure, and before I discuss that, let me just say I was so pleased to see so many faculty and departments and schools come together over the past week or so, organizing Zoom spaces for their faculty, staff, and students to come together and share their thoughts and their challenges and ideas on how we can move forward, both as a campus and as a society. So it was really heartwarming for me to see how the campus came together, in some cases individually as departments or as schools, to really try to address this and more importantly, provide a forum for people to express their concerns. And so as David mentioned, we're going to be in the process of announcing some changes and some additions in the Provost's office in the coming weeks to really allow us to focus on diversity and inclusion in a more focused and meaningful manner, looking at both continuing to diversify the student body, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, and really focusing on diversifying the faculty and creating a more inclusive environment. We've made some great strides in that space in the last 3 years I've been at Rice. I've seen the numbers dramatically increase. This year, we're adding 4 new African-American faculty to the School of Natural Sciences, and prior to that, they had 1. So they're increasing substantially. And you see this across many schools. And so there will be a focus on trying to diversify the faculty, because all the studies show that it has a dramatic impact on the environment for our minority students.
Thank you. A question regarding enrollment. With Rice intending to offer all classes in a dual format, do you expect a large number of students to elect to not return to campus in the fall? And have you seen an increase in the number of students wanting to defer their admission until next year?
Yes, at this point, we haven't seen a big increase. We've had a few questions. I think if we're in dual enrollment, we'll have maybe a few who might not be comfortable coming back to the campus, or international students who can't return. But if we're unable, I'm sorry, I think I said dual enrollment. I should have said dual delivery. But I think if we're not able to have courses on campus, I do think we'll see more than the usual number of students defer. Our students clearly value that sense of community you get on campus, some of the activities they can engage in, getting out into the city of Houston. And so I think if we're purely online in the fall, as we were at the end of the spring, we will see an increased number of deferrals. And that's certainly one of our concerns. But first and foremost, we'll follow the guidelines of the CDC and make sure our community is safe.
Can you elaborate on any challenges that occurred? Any students who were not successful after moving to online coursework in response to the pandemic?
Well, I think a lot of were under stress, and I think the measures the faculty adopted, which they did very, very quickly, I think really helped our students. They could take it pass fail, they could drop the course really at almost any point, and I think that really helped. I don't think the inability, at the end, I think the normal number of students graduated. Almost no exceptions had to be made in order to enable them to graduate. But we have to recognize that this burden doesn't fall equally, right? Not everybody has their own room at home and their own computer at home and a Wi-Fi network at home. And really the first generation and low-income students really need that supportive community in many ways, more than other students need that community to be successful. And so I think we are going to have to continue to think, if we're online again, how do we build that online community better, and how do we deliver services online better?
Thank you. When we resume in-person classes in the fall, can you talk about how the university is going to balance facilitating the safety of students and the faculty while maintaining the distinctive on-campus learning experience? And you just talked a bit about building virtual communities. So how do you expect the various experiences, whether they be the residential colleges or the classrooms or the lab experiences for faculty and the students participating, changing, given those constraints.
Yeah, so I'll let Reggie talk a little bit about the academic and lab experience. Maybe Reggie should begin with that, actually.
For the classroom, as David mentioned, everything will be in dual mode, delivery mode. So, which means that classes will be taught, most classes will be taught in person and remotely, and that enables us to accommodate both the students that can't physically be here, as well as the faculty that perhaps may not be in the classroom. And so a lot of effort and time is being put in. Faculty are already organizing as groups to figure out how that might change the curriculum, how it might change the pedagogy they use to be able to deliver a fairly engaging classroom experience. One of the aspects that many people have questions about is how we'll do labs, and that's one thing that we're really working hard. There are technologies out there to try to simulate labs. In some cases, this past semester, faculty actually shipped lab kits to the homes of students that weren't there to enable them to finish it from home. And so there are many creative ways that we're working to try to deliver a very similar classroom experience as we did when we're all together. I'm not sure if David wants to speak to the colleges and the experience there.
Yeah, so I think it will be different. At this point, we are going to put in a range of social distancing measures for the colleges and for students broadly on the campus. I put together a committee a while ago, which was called the ROVE Committee, the Rice Online Virtual Environment. And the task is really to start figuring out, how do we build community? Of course, the students are expert at this. They have those communities. We all wanted to learn from each other. The committee had students on it, faculty and staff on it. And I think we need to be more proactive than we have been. I'm spending most of my days in Zoom meetings. The students are in classes. You don't have those casual interactions that you're used to going into the class or leaving the class. And we need to create that environment that's partly technology, but it's also partly initiative and habit and culture. And so that's part of also what we're going to focus on over the summer. Again, we're hopeful to be on campus, but if we're not, if the students are not, we need to make sure that there are aspects of community that aren't fully dependent just on encountering their fellow students in the classes.
Thank you. We're getting some questions regarding testing and management of the COVID situation. So the questions are about Rice's approach to testing, tracing, quarantining, and distancing, and then what would trigger a decision to revert back to online only in the fall.
So we are currently planning to test everybody. We're in discussions with the institutions of the Texas Medical Center. Our good fortune is to be across the street from what we believe is the world's largest medical center, and we've begun those conversations about what the testing protocols will be, and then to have some mechanism for regular testing. We're looking at how we would engage in contact tracing, recognizing we also have to be concerned about privacy issues in the context of contact tracing, and then making sure that we have facilities if we need to engage in quarantining. We're in the process of looking at both what should be the criteria for making a permanent the right word, but sort of go forward decision probably in July about whether we will be on campus and exactly how we should judge that. And that's going to be looking in particular, first and foremost, at what the CDC does, what's going on across the country, in the state of Texas, among our peers in higher education. We're in regular communication with each other across higher education, discussing these challenges. And then the same thing on the other end. And one of the reasons, the key reasons for dual delivery was to be able to make a very fast decision if we had to go online. So we're assuming we don't have 2 weeks. We're assuming we don't have 1 week. If we need to go to online delivery only, we're assuming we can do that the next day. And that's really one of the key reasons we went to the dual delivery.
I'm getting also a lot of questions about the O-week experience and how that might change. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that is one of our concerns. I think, we're in the midst of planning. Of course, the students play a key role. O-week is, one of the most marvelous things on our campus, and probably my favorite day of the year is move-in day. And just to see the shock in a good way, the shock where people feel so welcomed as the students descend on the cars, and all the parents have been so worried about how they're going to get everything up to the room, and it turns out they don't even have to do anything to get the stuff up to the room. So we will have probably smaller groups, things that help maintain social distancing in those groups during a week. We're really in the midst now of laying all that out over the next month or so and making sure that we have an O-week design which is safe. Masks will be ubiquitous on our campus. We just set out the new rules. And basically, you have to wear a mask whenever you're inside a Rice building. And if you're outside a Rice building, you have to wear it if you're going to be within 6 feet of somebody else. Everybody is required on the Rice campus to have a mask with them so that if they do encounter somebody else, they can wear the mask.
Thank you. Question regarding how the COVID crisis is impacting graduate students. The question is, the crisis is extending the time it will take many graduate students to complete their thesis research. Graduate financial support, et cetera, teaching and research assistantships are often for a finite set of years. What's Rice's strategy for enabling these students who need extra time under these circumstances?
Yeah, so I think we've adopted already some measures to give them extra time. We're looking at stipend issues. I don't know, Reggie, if you have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So we've have set aside some funding for those who are taking a little bit longer. In many cases, students who are able to work remotely and shift from doing lab work and doing more data analysis. So I don't think they're going to extend it significantly. But in cases students have to be here for another semester or two, we're finding resources to get them through.
Thank you. And Reggie, since you're on now, there's a question regarding the research that's being done for COVID. Of course, President Leebron mentioned the low-cost ventilator design, but can you talk about some of the other promising research projects that are underway and Rice's faculty involvement in them?
Yeah, and there were 18 projects funded, as the President mentioned. I won't go through all of them. Some of the interesting ones, Rebecca Richards-Cordum, who many of you know through Rice 360, is working with MD Anderson to develop a low-cost point-of-care diagnostic tool to detect the virus that causes COVID-19 in less than an hour and at very low cost. Some of the other projects that I find very interesting, there's a project that's a joint effort between the School of Engineering and the music school that's actually looking at investigating the proper social distancing protocols for rehearsal and performance of musicians and singers by using high-speed imaging. And so there are really just a range of projects that involve every single school and nearly every department on campus. So it's really exciting to see all the projects coming forward.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. In the wake of the pandemic, many schools have reevaluated their position relative to standardized testing, as many students have found that they've had more restricted access to those tests. So what is Rice's approach to this issue for students applying for admission in the future?
So that we haven't announced that yet. We're looking at that. We're very much concerned about that limitation of access. And I think there's a question of, we could become more flexible. There are many kinds of standardized tests now, of course, and there are AP tests, for example, there are subject matter SAT tests. And so we're looking at that. We want to make sure the standard testing is not an obstacle to our applicants this year. If they can't get to a testing center, it's inconvenient for them to get to a testing center. We have not outlined a final policy on that, but I would guess we would do that. We're seeking advice from the community on that at Rice. There's a faculty group that's been convened to discuss that, and I would expect a decision on that within the next, well, I'm not sure, I shouldn't say, but the Dean of Enrollment, Yvonne Romero de Silva, is closely looking at that question to make sure that we really have full access for everybody, and the testing is not an obstacle.
Thank you. What can alumni do for members of the international student community who haven't been able to go home, and how will Rice support this community in the fall?
So that's a great question. If maybe things are let up a little bit, I'm sure they would welcome invitations to get food other than the food that we're providing them. If you happen to have originally been from one of those countries, our students really welcome the mentorships and the connections. It is hard for them. It's mostly at this point, I mentioned there were 250 students. That's the number we had on campus during the semester. That's down to about 150 students. They seem to have maintained a good morale. We continue to provide them with food, but we welcome, you know, any aspect of Rice engagement. And so if you sort of would like to host them in some way or send them more interesting food than they, well, I shouldn't say that. Our chefs are amazing. I mean, you know, when I have a choice between eating where the faculty eats and eating where the students eat, I eat where the students eat. The vegetarian options are so wonderful. I'm usually a vegetarian when I eat with the students. But, you know, maybe, you know, if you're here and you might be from some of the home countries of those students and you could, you know, send them some things, I think that would be really deeply appreciated for our students. And, you know, and then I think building these communities.
Thank you. Question from the audience. With the impact of the pandemic on the national economy, how can Rice support, you talked a little bit about this, future job prospects and opportunities of our graduating students? How can our community help?
That's really a great question. And I think first and foremost, you know, we built this Sally portal to connect our alumni with our students. One of the key reasons for the Sally portal. I would engage folks to use that and try to connect to students. And frankly, I think we need to do that better than we've done. We're a relatively small university. I think we have about 60,000 graduates. We need your help. We need you to help find where the jobs are and to support our students getting those jobs. And then we'll be looking at not only for Rice students, but also for Houston. What education do they need that can really help them be competitive in the jobs? How do they need to rethink about that? Where are the new jobs going to be? Are they going to be in data science, for example? And so we're looking at a data science major. Are they going to be in the health field? And how can we position people for that? So we need to think about how to best prepare our students for that world, how to use our alumni networks and to make sure our career services office is staffed as effectively as possible.
Thank you. I'm getting some questions regarding campus events like homecoming and reunion and families weekend and athletics events this fall, and how will we be handling those given some of the social distancing restrictions that will be in place?
So right now we are putting in place a limit on gatherings of 50 people, and so we'll have to look at those events, and is there a different way to do those events, and we'll have to look at the social distancing requirements. We're hopeful that we'll have some on-campus opportunities for folks around those events. And it's really exciting for us on the campus when our alumni come back. We don't yet know what the fall sports season is going to look like. Are we going to be able to play football and other sports in the fall, you know, that alumni come back for? So I think that's really an important part of the set of questions. We are beginning to plan for that, but you know, as I said many times already, it's a rapidly evolving environment. Right now, what we would say is we're going to have to figure out how to have some of those events while breaking them into smaller components and keeping some aspects of social distancing in place.
Thank you. How will Rice continue to pursue excellence alongside the economic fallout we're all experiencing? Will there be any ramifications on the quality of teaching and learning?
Well, yeah, maybe Reggie and I can share this question. I don't think there'll be an impact. Our faculty is so dedicated to what they do. It's just been remarkable. And as I said, even faculty who are teaching difficult subjects like art and music, you know, I sat in on some of those classes virtually. One of the few good things out of all this, I got to sit in on 25 classes. I didn't have to factor in the time of walking to the classes or walking back or disturbing the classes. And it was amazing to see what the faculty is doing. So I know how committed they are to that quality on the campus. Reggie, you want to add something here?
Yeah, it's clearly we don't expect to see any changes in the quality of the education. I think what the crisis has forced us to do is really look at how we do things. Can we be more efficient? Can we combine some services? Can we be more nimble? And so it's really forced us to do that in a way that I think it's going to make our university stronger moving forward. But we were just put in that position because of this crisis.
I think it's also going to change flexibility and opportunity for our students as we move forward into the future, where they think, well, maybe I'll take part of my education online and part of it in person for a range of things. Maybe they want to have an international experience. Some of our students now don't do things international because being particularly a comparatively small university, they don't want to miss the opportunity to take a particular course at a particular time. And so I think we're going to see more students taking that opportunity. Also on services that the students need. I heard on one call how students really wanted to be sure that they could continue to access the services online, even if the campus was open. They actually found that more convenient. So this is going to change the university a bit, but I don't think it's going to change it to undermine the sense of community on campus. We know our students desire that. I think it's going to enable them to tailor their education, to make it more personal to their needs by giving them more choices about how to consume that education.
Thank you. I see we're coming to the end of our hour. We know it's late. Folks are coming to us from many different time zones. So I wanted to end with one final question. And I think it's especially poignant in the times of significant disruption we're seeing. Where do you both see higher education going in the next 10 to 20 years? What insights can we anticipate from competition and from just changes to how we deliver what we offer to students?
Well, it's going to be a very challenging time, and we're going to see some colleges and maybe universities who sort of can't make it through this time. Even Rice won't be one of those. We're in very good shape. But when I look at these three crises together, I do see the beginnings of a fundamental transformation. We are reminded by the events in Minneapolis of the important role that we need to play in transforming our society. We need to be agents for change. And as I said, engines of opportunity. And that's a huge opportunity for us. We've already begun the process of being more involved in the city of Houston, which I think is really vitally important to us. In terms of the competitive landscape, I think it is going to get more intense. And with the emergence of online, we're going to see more participants. And we're already making decisions to be a larger player online. We were so relieved we had already made these timely investments in online education. When we saw what we were able to do with the summer registration, how that surged by making that available. I do think there are going to be a lot of financial pressures as well. I don't think that necessarily means the price of tuition is going to go down, but financial aid is going to be very important. But with the Rice investment, we're already one of the top universities. So I think you're going to see some sudden transformation, and then you're going to see an evolution, and particularly on the online space and a low-cost space. And I think for Rice, we're going to be looking at more of those opportunities as well, not just what's the very expensive kind of education we can deliver, the high-touch form of education, but how can we serve our community here in Houston and the world better by offering alternatives that really help prepare them for the world. Reggie?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, and I think, and David alluded to this earlier, is just the flexibility in how we deliver the education. I think you're going to find students coming in and out, maybe wanting to take some classes online and take some classes in person. So I think we're going to have to be very flexible in how we deliver our education, as well as how what the students study, and perhaps being more flexible and being able to craft their own curriculum and their own major, as opposed to being fixed in set majors as they are now.
So I just want to again thank everybody. I see there are a lot of questions that haven't been answered. I hope somebody's capturing those questions before we go offline so we can look at all those questions, because more often than not, there's a great idea embedded in the question. And so we want to learn what's on people's mind and think about what we can do differently. And I just want to thank our alumni again, our parents again. You more than ever are a vital part of this community. We want to learn what we can do better. This is a time that we need to learn what we can do better. We need to ask ourselves the hard questions. We need to engage in the hard conversations, and we need to move the university forward to new levels of excellence and new levels of contribution.
Thank you, David, or President Leebron. Thank you as well, Provost DeRoche, for your leadership, for taking the time to share your insights with the Rice community. Just a final reminder to everyone participating, we have been recording and we'll make it available so that those who weren't able to view can do so, and appreciate that we will, President Leebron mentioned that we want to take some time to look through the questions we couldn't get to so that we can follow up. Thank you all very much for participating. Have a good evening.